Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 17.3 has been out for a couple weeks at this point, and iOS 17.4 Beta 1 re-release has been out for a couple days. Thought we'd talk about some more new features that have been found since the iOS 17.4 Beta 1 re-release is out, what's new video, and also talk about the overall experience, my experience on the 15 Pro Max with both versions, as well as your experience from the YouTube community poll, where at the time of this video there's over 22,000 votes and 231 comments. I've gone through all the comments to determine what the overall experience is like for everyone. So we'll talk about that a little bit later and read some of your comments later in the video. But first I wanted to talk about a few different things as far as Apple news and as well as new features. Now, there were also numerous outages this week with Apple Music. If you were having issues with Apple Music, you're not alone. This was an issue not only with music, but with iCloud services in general, sometimes with Apple Pay. It seems like there was a lot of issues with iCloud in general. Whether or not they were getting ready for Apple Vision Pro or something else, it's hard to say, but either way, there were definitely some issues. Also, Apple had their earnings call. Apple's earnings call was the other day on February 1st, and they actually did better than expected. But one thing that caught the most attention is Tim Cook talked about Apple working on AI. They said that Apple is investing a tremendous amount of time and effort and that the details would come later this year. Apple's said to actually be working on this to go along with Siri and iOS 18 and much more. So how they're going to integrate this with something along the lines of ChatGPT and other things, we'll have to wait and see, but at least we know it's coming this year. Also, Apple said it now has over 2.2 billion active devices worldwide. That includes iPhones, Macs, iPads. That's an incredible number. Also, one other thing I wanted to share before we talk about new features is in the App Store. If we go into an app, maybe the TV app, and within the App Store, if we scroll down, you'll see we now have the option to see Apple Vision apps. So if you have an Apple Vision Pro, you'll have the option to see all of the different apps that support it. The App Store is live with over 600 apps and many others that are iPad apps as well that are compatible with it. So those are available now, and you'll see the little icon for that if there's a supporting app. Now, as far as new features, the first one that came out this week had to do with Replay 2024 on Apple Music. However, it looks like they've removed this. Maybe they had issues with Apple Music, and it seems to have disappeared, but it was showing up already. Let me know if you're seeing that currently now, and maybe it disappeared on you, or if you're still seeing it. Now, Safety Check is something we've had for a little while, and we gained some new features with iOS with stolen device protection. If we go into our settings, and then we go into privacy and security, then we scroll down. Under Safety Check on iOS 17.3 on the left, 17.4 Beta 1 re-release on the right, it looks a little different. It just says Stolen Device Protection is turned on, learn more. On the left, it actually says Stolen Device Protection is active, and so if they've just changed some wording, pretty small update, but something they've changed, maybe we'll see some additional updates in the future with this. Now, we know iOS 17.4 is bringing sideloading and third-party apps and app stores to the EU, but one thing it's also bringing is third-party browsers with their own browser engines. If you go into Safari for the first time in the EU, you'll get a new splash screen. I've shown this before, but there seems to be some confusion that I wanted to clarify. It asks you to choose a new browser, and this is going to be different in the future because they're allowed to use their own browser engines. Currently, if you're using Chrome on your iPhone or maybe Firefox or DuckDuckGo or something else, it's actually just a reskinned version of Safari, as Apple doesn't allow them to use anything other than WebKit, which is the underlying code of Safari. However, the EU is saying they have to allow this, so Chrome can use its own engine and others can as well. So that's going to be changed. We may see this across the world. We may not. It may help with speed on certain browsers, but privacy and safety, of course, will be brought into question depending on the browser. Most of these are fairly secure, but either way, it's going to change the way it works overall. So that's the difference there. It's just a different browser engine they can use, and Google's already prepared for this, so we should see that change soon with that. Also, one new feature, if you didn't see the re-release videos, if you go into the clock, you go to the stopwatch, start a stopwatch, and swipe home. If you have a dynamic island, you have new live activities. So press and hold, you have a new live activity at the top, or a dynamic island activity, and you can either restart the timer, stop it, or stop it altogether, or clear it altogether. So that's a little change there as well. Also, the other big change has to do with Apple Wallet. If we go into this and go to our Cash Card, under Apple Wallet Cash Card, you can now use Apple Cash with Safari autofill if they don't accept Apple Pay. You can set up a virtual card number and then use Apple Cash Card as the credit card for that website. You can just add money to it or remove it. Either way, it's something new that we'll be able to do with 17.4. So if you weren't able to use it before, this is sort of a workaround for that. Also, a couple other things I wanted to mention in the code. In the EU, you can now change your default wallet app as well. So the wallet app will be able to be changed out with something else third party that's allowed to use the NFC chip in the back of the phone. And also an odd thing in the code is Taylor Swift is mentioned for some reason. We're not really sure why that is, but it looks like Taylor Swift's mentioned. Maybe there's going to be more concerts or something else. I did want to ask you a question about the new emoji though. If we go into that, Apple is adding new emoji to comply with the emoji standard 15.1, where we have a walking stick for someone that might be hard of seeing or blind, and then also people facing right, and then some family options, the head turning left to right and up and down. This is not something that Apple actually adds themselves. They're just complying to a standard that you can see from Emojipedia. So this is something that's being updated regularly, not just by Apple, but Android and Windows and others. So I just wanted to clarify that, but I wondered what you think about emoji. Do you get excited for them? Do you care about them? Or you just are happy they're adding them, or you don't use them at all? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Now, also, iOS 18 is said to be a big upgrade this year, and like I mentioned earlier, Tim Cook confirmed that we'll hear more about AI later this year. But we're also expecting a major, hopefully updated redesign, maybe to be similar to visionOS or the biggest update we've ever seen. Hopefully this week we're going to get even more information about this. Of course, if I have a news video on Monday, we'll talk about that. But hopefully we'll see some big updates where we have revised apps, maybe more depth, maybe something to add to what we have already, or maybe a redesign such as what we have on Apple Vision Pro. So that's something we could see. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But at this point, I think it's going to be a major update. Hopefully we'll get a new control center and much more. Now, also we had new releases this week. The first one has to do with visionOS 1.0.2. This visionOS device, or Apple Vision Pro that I got today, actually shipped with visionOS 1.0, and I had to upgrade it to visionOS 1.0.2. It's supposedly a security fix, but I'll tell you, after using this, it's fairly buggy. It actually crashed on me a few times. I had some other people try it. Apps wouldn't open, they crashed. I rebooted it. It's just a little bit buggy, definitely a first generation device, and I'm not sure what I think of it yet. Is it a revolution? Is it something that we're going to see much more of in the future? Let me know what you think of that in the comments below, as I'm just not sure yet. I have to use it a little bit more, but right now it seems to be lacking as far as what you want to use it for, unless you use it for movies, or maybe use it as your Mac controller, or sort of a secondary monitor, or monitor for your Mac. So let me know what you think about it in the comments below and what content you would like to see regarding that in the future. Now, as far as other releases, iOS 17.4 Beta 2 is expected this coming week. Typically, every couple of weeks we have an update. Now, it's hard to say 100% if we'll see that, but I do think we will have that now that we have public Beta 1. Possibly on the 6th or 7th, we'll see Beta 2 and hopefully public Beta 2 as well. So iOS 17.4 Beta 2 hopefully will be this week. And then also the iOS 17.4 public release will probably be in a couple weeks, maybe on the 26th or the 4th. Sometime around the early March timeframe to comply with those rules in the EU. I would expect that very soon. Also, a couple other things worth mentioning is iOS 17.2.1 and iOS 17.2 are no longer being signed by Apple. That means you can no longer downgrade to them. So it's possible we could see a release before iOS 17.4, maybe iOS 17.3.1 to fix the current bugs, or maybe just have security fixes. We don't really know. I haven't seen any sort of hints of this just yet, but it's definitely a possibility at this point. So we could see that since they stopped signing that, along with older versions as well with iOS 16. Now, as far as iOS 17.3, we've had it for a couple weeks, and I did want to mention a couple concerns people have said to me or asked if it's actually a known bug. The first one has to do with emoji stickers. If we go into messages, you'll see with iOS 17.3, this is what those emoji look like. They don't show up properly when I sent it on this device and they synced. But if we go in and maybe you're using stickers, many people have said they're just blank, and you can see they're blank on my device as well. This is a bug Apple could fix with iOS 17.3.1 or something else, but at this point it definitely has some issues. The other issue many people have been saying it has is issues setting the wallpaper. I had issues with 17.4 beta 1 with that. The re-release fixed it. But if you're trying to set a wallpaper, I kept getting this error that said unable to save wallpaper, try again later. I had to try different formats and things, and it finally worked. But for whatever reason, I kept getting this. This was on 17.3 and 17.4 beta 1. So some odd bugs here and there. Again, on iOS 17.3, dictation is not working for some people and not working on watchOS 10.3. I heard this from a few people. Typically, it seemed to be related to people not having Wi-Fi enabled. So if you didn't use Wi-Fi, that was a bug for many people. If you have Wi-Fi enabled, I really haven't heard the issue. So if you don't have it working properly, turn on Wi-Fi on your Apple Watch, turn it back on or off, and then back on, and it typically will fix that issue. Also, some are still having the brightness or volume bug where you'll adjust this and it's really stuttery and sort of acts odd. It's just an odd animation, not a huge deal, but something people are seeing with volume as well as brightness. So it's just an odd bug there. As far as iOS 17.4 beta 1 re-release, it seems to fix a few issues for me. This is great news, and I think it's looking good going forward where we're finally getting a few resolutions to things. So we have no more keyboard lag for me. So if I type Apple, you'll see it's nice and fast, or store. Everything is very quick like you would expect. Also, connectivity seems to be pretty good. Now that we've had beta 1 re-release, it actually had a modem update, and I really haven't had any issues with cellular connectivity. Sometimes Wi-Fi is odd, but that seems to be on mesh systems where it needs to jump between different routers or different hotspots across the house. So if you have maybe a mesh wireless system, that could cause an issue, but for the most part, it seems to be pretty good. Beta 1 was also asking for my Apple ID all the time. It would sort of show a 1 here where I'd have to re-enter it. Beta 1 re-release fixed that. Also, some people complain, though, of bugs going on still with crashing lock screens and wallpapers when setting them. So that bug I had, along with crashing when you're trying to set the wallpaper. Also, one other thing that seems to have returned from previous updates is sometimes squared off notifications going along with that notification bug. So you'll see it just sort of is normal now, but it can be squared off. And then also the wallpaper desaturation bug is still there. It's very slight now, but it's definitely still there. It's not a feature. You'll see it desaturate as I move this up. It sort of takes a second and then desaturates. So that wallpaper dimming bug is still there. As far as the cameras, there was a little bit of a concern that it was getting worse for some people. I personally haven't seen this. It looks pretty consistent from these photos you can see here. And also one thing to note is if you recently saw my 15 Pro Max versus the S24 Ultra, all of the B-roll in that video was taken with a 15 Pro. So the footage is quite good, no issues there, and it wasn't even in ProRes. It was just taken with the camera. So if you want to see what it's really capable of, I use it in YouTube videos from time to time as it's good enough. So I really haven't had any issues. Let me know what you think of the camera, though, in the comments below. Performance seems to be pretty good. The phone is acting as you would expect. Everything's smooth, scrolling fast, maybe not as fast as Beta 1, as opposed to Beta 1 re-release when I switch between different things. It might be slightly slower as far as the animations, but that could just be an animation speed change. As far as anything else, opening apps is great. Things are loading fast. It seems to be what you would expect. As far as the heat of the device, so far this is nice and cool since the update. Beta 1 actually used quite a bit of the processor and was quite warm. That could be because it took a couple days to settle in, but at this point with the re-release, it seems to be much better. Let me show you that with the thermal camera. And at the hottest point, we're at about 87.5 degrees Fahrenheit on 17.4 Beta 1. On 17.3, I haven't used it, so we're around 83 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, in Celsius, we're around 31 degrees Celsius, and on 17.3, about 28.4 degrees Celsius. So both nice and cool to use, much cooler than before even, and it seems to be nice and fast just with regular use. As far as the battery life, well, iOS 17.3 is really hit or miss depending on who you ask. After the initial install, many people said it was phenomenal, it was much better, and let's go ahead and take a look at the cycle count, and then we'll talk about battery life. So if we go into our settings, and then we go to General, then About. On the left, I have 28 cycles, since this isn't my main phone anymore. On the right, with iOS 17.4, I have 97 cycles. This is my full-time phone. I use it every day. And as far as the overall battery health, let's go back and take a look here. We'll go to battery health and charging. We can do the same on both. I would expect this one on the left, of course, to be 100, and both of them are currently at 100. I charge them every night, just like I always have, sometimes in the car, and that's about it. As far as battery life, like I said, I've been using this full time, as you can see here. With 17.3, I could get through the day, maybe have about 40% left, no issues there. With 17.4 Beta 1 re-release, it seems to be a little bit better than it was before. Not phenomenal, but I've had 4 hours and 45 minutes of screen active time today, and 5 hours and 42 minutes of screen idle time, and I have, well, 50% left, but I did charge it for a little bit, and you can see that here where it says last charged at 12:36 p.m. If we take a look at the day before, 2 hours and 21 minutes. So it's getting me through the day, but I typically have about 20 to 30% left. Some people say it's much, much better. Some people say it's worse as far as battery life. That really comes down to the apps you're using, notifications you have lighting up the screen. If you're using Meta apps, they typically use more power. So if you're using Instagram or Facebook, just depends what you're using. But most people say that it's better if they're running the Beta 1 re-release or public beta. If not, well, it can vary depending on the overall device and what you're using. But I did have someone actually tell me about 17.3 that got them about 9 hours or so. So it just depends on how you're using it. Also, as far as iPadOS 17.4 Beta 1, we didn't get a re-release with this update, and it's pretty stable overall. I haven't had any issues with it, no apps crashing, nothing else, and so far it's nice and fast and smooth. Everything seems to be functioning as you would expect, and battery life really hasn't changed a whole lot. If you take a look at battery health here on the left with coconut battery, and then also my battery life, I'm getting about 6 hours with regular use. So nothing phenomenal, but what I've been getting before. So the same as the public version, I'm getting on the betas as well. So maybe it'll get a little bit better with future iPads, as we're expecting those probably in March or so. But at this point, 6 to 7 hours at best is what I'm seeing. Now, if you're wondering if you should install iOS 17.3, the security updates in it are pretty important, so I would recommend it regardless of what some people's experience are. There's bugs in all of the versions Apple's had this year. Some are better, some are worse. But as far as iOS 17.4 Beta 1 re-release or iOS 17.4 public Beta 1, if you want to install this and you've never tried a beta, go for the public beta. Otherwise, if you're on the previous betas before the re-release, definitely install the new one. But other than that, I'd probably hold off until beta 2 and see if it gets a little bit better, even though it is quite good at this point. But if you're wanting to try one out, go for the public beta if you've never run one before. Now, as far as benchmarks, let's go ahead and take a look at those. We'll run those. I haven't run them in a while, or for a little while on this device, so let's run it here in a moment. Benchmarks completed, and I just reran these on both, like I said, and on 17.3, we have 2,967 for single core compared to 2,916 on 17.4 Beta 1. For multi-core on 17.3, we have 7,333 compared to 7,039. So it's a little bit lower on 17.4 Beta 1 re-release. That's typical when you're running a beta, but so far they're quite good on both. Both are plenty fast. I really don't have any issues with this, but it is a little bit lower. So in general, I don't expect any difference there, but it should go up in time as we get closer to a final release. One other thing I wanted to mention has to do with connectivity of AirPods. A couple people mentioned some issues of them disconnecting. I really haven't had any issues with my iPhone, but rather them disconnecting on my Mac. It depends on which Mac. And sometimes one will just grab the actual connection for some reason, and I can't get it back easily. So that's something I've been experiencing, but no drops. It seems to work fine for me. And these are AirPods Pro 2, so really no issues with these. And also, if you have AirPods Max, there was an update recently as well. So make sure that that's updated. Just plug them in and put them next to your iPhone after listening to them for about 30 seconds or so. They typically will update on their own. Now, as far as what you had to say about the overall updates, let's take a look at that. Zinc Games said iOS 17.3, it's running great. I haven't had any problems. Battery life is great as well. Quad Rider Honda said, using 17.3 on 15 Pro Max and the battery is starting to get worse for me. At first it was better and haven't done anything different, getting about 6 hours of screen on time and I'm at 99% battery health. Been reporting battery and feedback every day until Apple can fix it by turning on the beta under software updates, then finding the feedback application and submitting feedback on it. Hope it gets fixed soon with a 0.1 update. Mr. JZ Chan said iPhone 13 Pro 17.3, Wi-Fi and mobile connectivity problem. Sometimes have to put it in airplane mode and reconnect it, only then it works again. Rack Scaling said, updated to 17.4 beta on 15 Pro Max last night and have had the best battery life I've had on probably any phone I've ever had. 17.3 and everything before were average, but I work third shift and since I updated, my battery is like a tank. I've live streamed Twitch all night, plus a bunch of media scrolling and had plenty of battery by the time I got off. I don't know what they did with 17.4, but at least on the 15 Pro Max, my battery has been the best I've seen yet. Mariette Dave, hopefully I'm saying that properly, running iOS 17.4 and had the keyboard in Safari not respond. Had to reboot the phone. Boogle23 said, so far my performance on my iPhone 14 Plus is really great. Easily gets me through a day with just a single charge, but still having the issue of the brightness where adjusting it still occurs the glitch. I really hope this bug may resolve soon. Performance-wise is okay, but not as smooth as the previous version. So that's everything with iOS 17.3 and iOS 17.4 Beta 1 re-release. If you found any additional features or have a different experience, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.